أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Today we begin our lesson on Sura al Takathur. In order to understand this particular surah, we need to have a historical context of the seerah or the life of the Prophet ﷺ. I know many of you might have studied the life story back in the day when you was young. There's no harm in going over some of the key milestones in his life, just so that the context of the surahs that we're about to cover would become clearer. So let me start off with this particular slide. So on the top, in this particular row, I've got the calendar year. So this was the 570 in the Christian era when the Prophet ﷺ was born. His age shows 0 there. And then it's not going in 1 year sort of pockets. It jumps. So basically, this was the year of the elephants. Abraha, we did Surah Alam Tara the other day. And then we have the birth of the Prophet some 50 days later after that event. And even at this time, the father of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Abdullah, dies. Then for the first 6 years, he was in the care of his mother Amina, and she also passed away when he was 6. Then for the brief period, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather, took custody over the child Muhammad, and he also passed away. And thereafter, Abu Talib, who was the uncle of the Prophet, looked after him from this period of about 8 years right down to about when he was 51, because this is the point where Abu Talib passes away. Then at the age of 25, the other landmark is he marries Khadija, a widow aged 40. And then we have at the age of 40, the first revelation coming to him in the form of Iqra in the first 5 verses that were revealed to him. So and this is the point where the first, when he came down Mount Hira, it was Khadija, his wife, that he went to first, and she accepted the message. Abu Bakr, his closest friend, also soon thereafter accepted the message. And the young boy, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, also accepted the message. So this was the first group of 4 or 5 people that accepted Islam. And then after about 3 years of revelation coming in a piecemeal kind of way, a revelation came to the point where it said, "Oh, you wrapped up in a mantle," referring to the Prophet, "arise and warn." In other words, he had to go public with this message of Islam. And thereafter he actually went public. He even went on Mount Safa one day to invite the Quraysh of the day to say, if I told you there's an army about to sort of attack you, will you believe me? And they all said resoundingly yes. But when he told him, please, this is what the message is, and I am the Prophet, and believe in Allah, then everybody just scattered and went away and just ignored him. So things were very tough in the first few years. There were a handful of people that accepted Islam, like Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. At one point, we heard his sister reading the Quran, and after he heard those verses, his heart melted, and he came and he professed Islam. His other uncle Hamza also accepted Islam at this time. And so the first 6 years were kind of years where they were very small community of a handful, and it was very tough trying to sort of preach and teach Islam amongst a group of people that were totally opposed to it. And then we have a situation when he was about 46 years old that, they say if you can't, you try and win people over in different ways. So this offer, the Quraysh of Makkah said, let's use Abu Talib as our go-between, and let him as an uncle as well as the person who was the custodian of the Prophet ﷺ, let him go with this particular offer. And the offer was very, very tempting for anybody who was weak-willed. The first thing that was said was, if you want to become wealthy, that's possibly even the most wealthy person amongst the Quraysh We will let you have the wealth in whatever form you want it, and only to for you to stop Islam. So that was the first offer. The second offer, they said, well, look, if you, we know you're married, but even if your heart is with one of the other most beautiful ladies of the time in Makkah, then we will ensure that that person gets married to you. Then the third offer was, they said, even if you desire power, in other words, if you wanted to become the chief, you're not a chief right now, but if you're a chief of one of our tribes and we all bowed and pledged allegiance to you, we'd give you even that most powerful seat. You know, there's the kingship of Quraysh and of Makkah in general. So the Prophet ﷺ heard these three offers, and to it he made an amazing statement. He said, you know, Abu Talib, go back and tell the people that if you had to take the sun no, and pluck it out of the sky and put it in my right hand, and at night take the moon, pluck it also out of the sky and put it in my left hand, I will not renege on this particular faith that I am following. So I don't accept any of these offers you have made. Now, if somebody is not bribable, or if you throw money or position or power at people and they don't take the offer, then obviously you can see what strong metal they made of, and that they will never be corrupted. And then you got to do other things. So then the other things that started were people were abusive to him. They swore at him. They put thorns in his way where he was walking. They would throw dirt from his neighbor's house into his house over the little fence or little wall that was there. They did all these kinds of things to make his life miserable. It reached such a point where he didn't want to budge, and the number of Muslims were growing steadily, not very much, but still enough for the Quraysh to be worried that the status quo is being affected by this man and his message. Then came a time at the age of 50 where the Quraysh got together, all the tribes, and they said, you know what, if we can't sort of bribe him and get him onto our side, let's do the next thing, which is let's impose trade sanctions on Muhammad and his band of followers. So the boycott years start, and these are the three very difficult years the Prophet and the Sahaba of the day endured at the hands of the Mushrikeen. And it was during this time that, well, the ones that were in Makkah were boycotted, but Allah suggested to the Prophet that some of them should actually go to make a hijrah to Abyssinia at this stage. So some Jafar ibn Abi Talib actually went across with a few Sahaba, and the king Negus of Abyssinia was a very staunch Christian, but he listened to both sides and he actually allowed them sanctuary in Ethiopia. So that was the first, like, kind of a Muslim sort of state of sorts, but they were given housing and allowed free sort of freedom to express and freedom to practice their religion in a Christian dominated area of Ethiopia. During this time also he went to Taif to say to think that maybe if the Meccans were very harsh, maybe the people in Taif, some 2 hours drive, away in the mountains, maybe they would accept Islam. So he went there with the message he preached, but they also rejected to such an extent that they had the boys to throw stones at him, to such an extent that he bled, and the blood actually flowed down his leg, and actually the sandal that he was wearing got stuck to his feet with the blood, and the blood of the Prophet. So there was, even in Taif, there was no sort of acceptance of the message. Then to add to it, he loses his uncle Abu Talib, that pillar of support. Although he was still a kafir, he never became a Muslim, but at least he gave custodianship to the Prophet and looked after him all the years. He loses that pillar of support. Then a year later, he loses the biggest pillar of support to him, his wife, Khadija al-Kubra, and from amongst all his wives, he always used to remember her and the sacrifices she made with him in these trying years. So this is essentially the Meccan period. So if you look at the period of the revelation here was from 40 to the age of about 53. So it's about a 13-year period, which we call the Meccan period. Then we have the Hijrah, where what actually happened is once a year they used to have an annual, like an event, not a Hajj as such, because I mean, there was idols in the Kaaba and all that, but they used to have a gathering around the Kaaba where all the neighboring tribes used to come as delegations to pray to their different gods and etc. So in this period, 3 years before the Hijrah, a group of 6 people from the Medina came and accepted Islam secretly. Then the next year they went back and 12 people came from the same place from Medina and they accepted Islam. And then by the third year, about 70 odd people came and they also accepted Islam. So there was like a growing community of new Muslims some 400 kilometers north of Mecca in Medina that was beginning to accept Islam. And at that time, when things were really tough for the Muslims here in Mecca, the command was given to the Prophet that, you know what, now is the time to leave Mecca and go undertake the Hijrah and start a new life in a new city, in a new area. So even at this point, if you look at what was the behavior and the decorum of the Prophet ﷺ. He was known as Al-Amin and As-Siddiq even in this Jahiliyyah period, this period where the Quraysh didn't want to accept his message, but at least from his honesty perspective, they knew he was the only one person they could trust. So they used to leave their belongings with him in safe custody at his house. So when the Prophet was about to make the Hijrah, he told Abu Talib who was going to sleep in his bed when Abu Bakr and the Prophet was supposed to leave, he said, this belongs to so and so, make sure you give it to him because it's an amanat, a trust that I have in my possession, and you need to give it to them. So he didn't hold any grudge or hatred against any of these people, although they imposed the boycott and the sanctions against them. But he did this right till the very end. He gave back to all the people that he had trusts of, he gave them back their trust. We then move to the next stage, which is the Medina era. In the Medina period, we notice it's a very short period of only 10 years. In each, more or less, each year is one Rawiya. So at this point in time, after the Hijrah is made, the first place of worship is established in Masjid al-Quba, and then the Prophet's own mosque, Masjid al-Nabawi, was the land was bought from 2 orphans, and a very simple structure of a little mosque of basically sand at the bottom with palm tree leaves as walls and coverings on the roof. And next to it, he had 1, 2 rooms, small rooms where he stayed. So his house and the mosque were like intertwined next to each other. And this was the first time that congregational prayer was made, sort of came into vogue. And at this time, also after the first year, the command came that now you can fight wars. In other words, if you are attacked, then you need to retaliate. You don't sit back and give the other cheek. You fight back. So the commandment about jihad and fighting in war was given, and thereafter the 3 major battles were fought: the Battle of Badr, Uhud, and the Trench. Um, we know the Badr, there were only about 313 Muslims against 1,000 well-armed Quraysh, and the Muslims were given a decisive victory during the month of Ramadan. Then the Battle of Uhud the next year was on the outskirts of Medina, along the mountains, and there was a mountain pass that the archers were told to look after, and some of them thought the battle had stopped or had ended when Khalid ibn Walid, the leader of the Quraysh, left behind the booty and went to the side of the mountain. And when he realized that people were going down that sort of hillock to capture the booty, he then went around the mountain and came back. And this was almost like a near defeat for the Muslims, all because they didn't follow instructions. But nevertheless, they didn't lose faith. They were still Muslims alive, and they continued with the message. Then the 5th year, the the Quraysh decided to come in, basically forming an alliance with all the different tribes of Makkah as well as in Medina, whoever was not yet Muslim, to sort of attack the Muslims. And Salman al-Farsi suggested that trench be built around Medina, and people, it was quite deep and quite wide, so it was the sort of the barrier of the day, and the 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 Confederates or the armies came, and when they came to the trench, they couldn't cross it, and if they did cross it, they would get shot at with arrows, or or the sword be killed. So basically, the Battle of the Trench, and this lasted for a good number of weeks. And at the end, a big storm came across and wiped them out, and they basically retreated without really fighting in the war. But that was like the final big defeat for the Quraysh, and then they left. Then the next year, there was a Treaty of Hudaybiyah, victory of sorts, but we'll look at that treaty in greater detail later. And then later we have the year of delegations, where when the Prophet now sort of entrenched his power, got rid of some of the Jewish tribes out of Medina who were always being a threat to the Muslims, in playing a dual role of siding with the Quraysh. But all in all, there was a year where delegations came from as far afield as Yemen and Iraq and elsewhere. Groups of people came in en bloc, accepted Islam, and went back, and people then Prophet sent people to teach these people about Islam as well. So Islam started spreading in pockets all around Medina and far away from Medina as well. Then we come to the last year of his life, where the Fatih Makkah, the conquest or the opening of Makkah happens. The first Hajj or pilgrimage was performed, and the Prophet also delivered his final sermon at that particular Hajj. And then the Prophet also got ill and passed away. So essentially, this is the 13-year period, Makkah, and 10-year of Medina, that we need to know of in terms of the surahs that were revealed. Now we go to the next slide, which is essentially looking at when were some of these surahs that we are studying or will be studying were revealed. So Iqra was revealed at the age when he was 40, the first one. Then Surah Fil came soon thereafter as a full surah. Quraysh was also revealed at that time, and Surah Fatiha, how to perform prayer, and that was also revealed at the time, the opening of the Quran. Now, if you look at the Quraysh, if you remember 40 years ago, in the year when he was born, they were reminded about all the benefits that the Quraysh were given by way of peace and security and food and all the rest of it. But after even that sort of such an important event that happened in front of their eyes, and they witnessed this defeat of Abraha and his army, they still continued in their ways of polytheism for 40 years. So really speaking, they were kind of adamant in their beliefs and remain steadfast on polytheism, no matter what. So Quraysh was a reminder at that time about how they are and how they should have been. So Surah Fil and Quraysh go together, and they were stark reminders of what can happen to people who oppose the faith. Then we look at Surah Ma'un, which we did previously, about the different kinds of mushrikun that were there, and how they didn't look after the orphans and the needy and the poor, and refused to give small acts of kindnesses and charities. And then today's surah, which is Al Kawthar, got revealed also around this time, when one of the Prophet's sons had passed away, and we'll study that in detail. Then we come to the boycott years, Surah Ikhlas, talking about sincerity in belief, and Surah Lahab, which is about the one enemy of Islam, Abu Lahab. And then towards the end of this period, the Surah Kafirun, Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun, was revealed, and we'll study that in the next lesson. Then we go across to the Medina period. We know about the Surah Al-Fath, which is not Ida Ja'a Nasrullahi, Al-Fath is the other one, Inna Fatahna Laka Fathan Mubina. This one was revealed after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, complimenting the Prophet about that particular treaty that was signed, which some of the Sahabas thought it was not in the favor of Muslims, but there was wisdom in the way the treaty was worded, and Surah Al-Fath was revealed to talk about this victory of sorts. Then we have Surah Nasr, which is Ida Ja'a Nasrullahi, Al-Fath, just before. Fatih Makkah. And we'll study that also at a later period. All right, the pictures and maps I'm sure you've seen, and you can read the notes that I've supplied to you. So this is Jabal Hira on the left and Jabal Thor during the Hijrah, where Hazrat Abu Bakr and the Prophet spent about 3 nights in hiding south of Makkah when the Quraysh had put a bounty on the head of the Prophet to be either brought dead or alive back to the Quraysh. But they were given sanctuary by Allah in this little cave, and alhamdulillah, they survived. And after 3 days, they were able to carry on with their journey and go to Medina. So, at the start of Islam, with 3, 4, 5 people converting to the 10th year after Hijrah, when there was like 100,000 people that this final pilgrimage was done with, and the Arafat message, that final sermon was delivered on the plains of Arafat. Okay, we then move on to Surah Al-Kawthar, which is for today. It's very short, in fact, probably the shortest surah, barely about 12 words in it. It gets its name from this word Kawthar. Kawthar means abundance, or the source of the greatest spring in Jannah. Now, you've probably heard of the Hawd Kawthar, the pool or the source, the ultimate where the main river of Jannah flows from. And the thing about this Kawthar is it's it's the way it's described in Hadith literature is that the banks of this river is made out of pearl. The water itself is whiter than milk and sweeter than honey. And one sip of it from the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, if we are happy, if we make it to Jannah, of course, then they say that you will never ever be thirsty again. So it's an amazing spring or source of water in Jannah, in the main sort of river of Jannah. Now, Allah is saying here, surely we have given you Al-Kawthar. Right? So Kawthar can mean two things, abundance of good, and also Kawthar in terms of Jannah, the source of all the waters of Jannah. Then it says, for Salli li rabbika wanhar, Salli, from Salah, to perform Salah to your Lord, and wanhar, Yami Nahar, I'm sure you've heard of the word Nahar and days of Qurbani. Nahar is the sacrifice of animals. And normally Nahar is also to do with big animals, so like a camel size, not just a rabia or a sheep or goat. It's talking of many animals of the size of camel. And then Inna Shaniyaka wal Abatar, surely your enemy is the one who is Abtar, the most cut off. Now, just to give you a background to this surah, we need to know how many children that the Prophet ﷺ had. He had 3 sons, Qasim, Abdullah, and Ibrahim. Ibrahim was the last of his male progeny, and the mother of Ibrahim was Maria al-Qibtiyya, Maria the Coptic, and all these 3 sons died in their infancy. In other words, they were either 3 years or maximum 4 years. Then he had 4 sons, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima. So the total of 6 children of Khadija, his first wife. So she had 4 daughters and 2 sons, the first 2 from Khadija. Now, when Qasim was born prior to the revelation of the Quran, so prior to Islam being pronounced, so he came and went. There was no real issue in terms of the Quraysh. But when Abdullah, the second born, was of the sons, was born, we had 2 main enemies of Islam, Al-As ibn Wa'il, as well as Abu Lahab, who happens to be the uncle of the Prophet as well. They used to comment using this word abtar. They used to say the verb is batara. Right? Batara yabtur. So batara, and they used to say kad butira Muhammad. In other words, Muhammad's lineage or his male offspring has like been cut. So he's like an he's the Quraysh used to live in a very male chauvinistic kind of environment. So male offspring were regarded as very, very important and almost sublime, and just for the fact that they had sons and then they could have big armies and fight and the rest of it. And women were regarded as you know like liabilities. They were buried alive in the days of Jahiliyyah. Imagine a father doing that to his baby daughter just to, as part of the traditional custom of the day. So it was really days of ignorance. So, in any case, they mention this now. Why this is serious is because if you look at, by implication, what they're saying, Abu Lahab and Al As ibn Wa'il, these two enemies, are saying that, you know what, we've got sons, and look at you, Muhammad, you can't even get a son. Or rather, even if you have a son, he dies so early in life. Right? So it's kind of pride and arrogance coming on the side of the polytheists of the day. But also, what's worse is if Abu Lahab is your very uncle, your blood, your related by blood to you. In other words, the father, your father's brother, Abu Lahab, also uses this term. It's very, very undignified and it's very obscene actually to make these kind of comments. And what was worse is they made this comment at the time when the Prophet was mourning. In other words, his son Abdullah just died, and imagine they are rejoicing. Imagine being happy at, some people in war, they're not like that. They at least respect conventions of sorts to not to, do, you know, misery and things that they mete out today in genocides and the rest of it. But here you have an individual who is your member of your family, but you don't respect him, and you are happy at the point that his son has died, and hopefully you won't have any male progeny, and we can rejoice at this. So it's quite a shocking kind of statement. But having said that, you look at the actual surah itself now. It starts off with the connotation is about the fact that your progeny is the one that is most cut off, right? Now, in this surah, what we're learning is that Allah is saying, Allah knows that the fact that the Prophet just lost a son. But what he does about it is he says, surely we, inna, right? Inna is the surely, or certainly, most definitely, without any doubt. If you add an alif to it, it becomes inna, surely we. So certainly we, or surely we. A'atainaka is we. This na again is we. And a'ata is to give or to bestow, confer a favor of, right? So surely we, this we again, have given or bestowed ka to you al-Kawthar. Right? So never mind that you've lost a son. What we've given you in the year after is far more than that one individual, one baby son that has died. We've given you even more than that. In fact, the most we can give to anybody, which is the ultimate thing. In Jannah, we're giving you al-Kawthar. The other thing is, a'ata is a past tense verb. So we have given you. Right? Now, normally, if something, like say, if the Prophet is alive and Allah is saying that I am giving you, which is a present tense, then it will be inna sanu'tika, so or nu'ti alayka. So surely we will be giving you, or we are giving you. But Allah is not saying that it's happening now or it's going to happen at some time in the future. He's actually solidifying that in the past tense to say, surely we have given you already that. So you don't have to doubt it. You've been granted it, and no one else in the world will be given such a great bounty like Al Kawthar. So, what must you do if you are given such a great bounty? The next ayah says, for Salli. From the word Salah is pray or venerate, worship, right? For Salli. Perform your prayer, then perform your prayer li to, and Rabb, we've had Rabb quite a few times already in Surah Fatiha. It's Maliki Yawmiddin. No, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The Rabb, the sustainer of all the worlds. The word Rabb, even we had فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, in Surah Al-Ilafi Quraysh, then let them worship the Lord of this house. So we have the word Rabb before, so you know Rabb. So worship your Lord and do a big sacrifice. Now, important about the sacrifice also is the Prophet was at this time, just before the Hijrah, actually very, very poor. although he was married to Khadija, but the boycott years were kind of starting and people were harassing them as a small ummah of Muslims. Now, imagine Allah is telling you at that time, do a large sacrifice, which actually wasn't in his means, and he never actually did it in that time before Hijrah at all. So this prophecy or what Allah had requested, he only did it after the Hijrah when it was the first camel that he bought that he used for the Hijrah journey. And then when they were in Medina, that's when he did the first major sacrifice. And the idea of a big sacrifice at a time of mourning, there's also wisdom in that you then invite you look after the needy and the poor by giving them meat from that particular sacrifice. So it's a bit of al-ma'un coming in here as well. The previous surah we just did that you must not only pray, but you must make sacrifice and make it as often as possible. And they say in the last final pilgrimage, the Prophet ﷺ, made a sacrifice of 63 camels, 1 year for every year of his life. So essentially, when the fortunes of the Prophet ﷺ changed, he then fulfilled this instruction of Allah very end, right at the end of his life when he could afford it, that he actually did this particular big sacrifice. And then the surah ends with, surely your inna shaniyaka, this ka is your, right? So we have ka there, we have ka here, we have ka here. So here it's shaniya means enemy, and he is the one al-abtar. Now here, if you look at the word, say like the word kabir means big. From Kabir, you get Akbar, which means bigger than or greater than. And then you have Al Akbar, which is the greatest or the biggest. The opposite is Saghir. So you get Asghar and Al Asghar as well. Now, here, if you look at Al Abtar, Allah is confirming that by putting an Al in front of Abtar, is making it definite that you are the one. And in this form, the most cut off. In other words, you're not only cut off, like you were just saying that the Prophet's genealogy was cut or stopped or stifled by the death of his son. But Allah is guaranteeing that your enemy is actually the one who is going to be the most cut off. He's going to be the most destitute, the most in need of Allah's help, but he won't get it because he was cruel to you now, and Allah will show the result of his cruelty to him in the year after. So it's a very short surah that is giving sort of hope to the Prophet at a time of mourning. And in a sense, this is the advice also that we have whenever we lose children. And it's very hard. Like the Prophet ﷺ went through it all. He lost almost all his children in the while he was alive. In other words, he buried from the 4 daughters and the 3 sons, so from 7 children, altogether he buried 6 of them while he was alive. So he went through a very torrid lifespan where all his own children were buried by him. Then secondly, if you look at his uncles and his parents, obviously he was an orphan, so he lost his parents when he was young. Even his uncles like Hamza was lost in Battle of Uhud. Abu Talib was lost as well. So he went through a lot of hardship and a lot of sort of funerals in his family. And Allah is telling him also and telling us all through this that whenever you have a loss in your family, the best way of overcoming the loss is have hope about the Jannah or the Sirat al-Mustaqim that you are going on and hopefully going to drink from this Holy Kawthar one day. That's one hope you must have. Then what you should practically do is do these 2 things. Remember your salah and your dua and your prayer. Never lose hope in that. And also the fact that you should remember who your Lord and Sustainer is at all times. And when you have the means, do as much sacrificing as possible. Do your charities work, your humanitarian work as much as possible, because that is going to give you solace and hope and make you recover from the death of a loved one easier. So focus on other people and doing good to others, and you will then receive the comfort you so long desire at a time of such pain and hardship that you're going through when your own son dies at such a young age. So I think in all, this is a message for all of us about how to deal with death in our families and how to pick up and stand up and continue and do whatever we can to make the world a better place and for others, and in the process for yourselves as well. Okay, so with that we end on this ayah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.